Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. We have a great show for you today. We will be covering the Houston Texans Monday Night Football victory over the Dallas Cowboys. We'll discuss the 76ers dropping to 2-11 and their team meeting that occurred after that game after that loss that they suffered against Miami. We'll discuss the Jets firing GM Joe Douglas. We'll discuss Guardiola. He has agreed with a new contract to stay at Manchester City, ending the rumors of him leaving City at the end of the season. And also we discussed the 49ers. They suffered that loss in gut-wrenching fashion to the Seahawks. And we will discuss whether or not the 49ers are suffering from a Super Bowl hangover. If you have a question during the show, we want to hear it. Your input is a big part of what makes this show successful, and we thrive on your energy and insights. Whether it's a quick comment or a thoughtful question or an opinion you just have to share, please don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. If you want to make absolutely sure your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Just use the super chat button at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This guarantees that your super chat gets read on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. We really rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we appreciate every bit of it. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit that super chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and exciting as possible. And if you prefer, you could always go to the GSMCpodcast.net to tip, donate, or leave a comment or question there. We really couldn't do what we do without your amazing support, and we're so thankful to have you as part of our community. Yeah, but we have to start off, though, with the Texans Monday night victory over the Dallas Cowboys. Yeah, I had to throw that one in there. But the Texans were able to rout the Cowboys on Monday Night Football, at the end of the game, comfortable victory over the Cowboys with the 27-10 or 34-10 victory over the Cowboys. Joe Mixon had himself a day with 20 carries for 109 yards and 3 touchdowns. He averaged 5.5 yards a carry, and he was effective in the run game. Stroud had himself a pedestrian game, 23 of 34, 257, one god-awful interception that we'll get to. But overall, this game was all about Cowboys rather than good Houston. I have to say, now obviously the Cowboys are coming into this game challenged as a unit. They've been reeling of late. They've dropped a lot of games, and they don't have their quarterback for the rest of the season. So, we know it's over for them, for the Dallas Cowboys, and this game, essentially put the nail in the coffin. Now if they were able to get the victory in this game and put themselves at 4-6, maybe you had some sort of outside hope, but yeah, season was over. Cooper Rush, he made a few throws here and there. I thought he had a really nice ball into CeeDee Lamb to make it a 4th-and-1. Probably his best throw of the game. That 4th-and-1 ended up not 4th-and-2. That 4th-and-2 ended up not getting completed, which was a momentum shifter as the Cowboys had the ball down 10, and that really changed the game. They had the ball down 10, 20-10. They actually ended up hitting a 64-yard field goal on that drive. Penalty extended the drive for the Cowboys. Cowboys get it on get the ball. It's back on that drive. They end up gaining a few more yards, and they find themselves 4th-and-2 from around the 25 or so, or no, not even the 25, like the 18 or something like that. They didn't end up getting that, and not only they missed out on on the touchdown, but they missed out on all 3 points there. Then it completely blew open the game for the Texans. Or actually, no, the Texans offense stalled because they were pretty pedestrian the entire game, that Texans offense. But then the occurrence, the defensive touchdown from the Houston Texans, where they were able to strip sack Cooper Rush, recovered by, I forgot what lineman it was, but recovered by one of the Cowboys linemen, who he also ended up fumbling the ball, and then Texans recovered, back for a touchdown. It reminded me, very similar. The 49ers actually benefited off a play like that. You go all the way back to that year that the Niners reached the Super Bowl the first time. That really, really good team that the 49ers had, where they played Seattle Seahawks, and I believe they were 8-0, the Niners, 8-0 entering this game, 8-0, and they were going up against the Seattle Seahawks that were also had a really good record. I believe they were 7-2 or something like that, and they 49ers got one of those double fumbles, and then they strip sacked Ross, and then I think it's Effetti, the lineman for the Seahawks, ended up recovering the fumble. He tries to run with it, then he ends up coughing it up into DeForest Buccaneers' path, who returns for a touchdown. Exact same play to that, and once that happened, But yeah, as far as the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, what can you say? You want to build for next season at this point. This season is a wrap. You're 3-7. You're beyond the outside looking in. Now you're in a position where you're looking at next year's draft picks. Mike McCarthy, he's a dead man walking at this point. I can't see him being around that much longer in terms as a head coach of the Cowboys. I think it's just got stale there, and yeah, they're really in a horrible position, this Dallas Cowboy organization is, because they just re-signed Dak Prescott. He's the highest paid quarterback in the league, and there's some serious questions if he's up to the caliber of that contract. He's been in the league for, he's 30. I believe he's 30. Yeah, he's 31 years old. Going to be turning 32 in July, and he's won 2 playoff games in his career, and the most recent one came against a Buccaneers team that finished 8-9 in that regular season, and scraped into the playoffs by winning one of the worst divisions in the history of football. So there needs to be context with that. Now, obviously, he's had some really good regular season performances, and he has been in the MVP. He was in the MVP race last season, but that MVP caliber quarterback that we saw in the regular season, where was he against Green Bay when the Cowboys needed him the most? And again, I understand why the Cowboy fans are reluctant to put the whole future of the organization in his hands, because, well, he's let them down over and over again. And Jerry Jones, he is he wants all the power, all the control, and of the Dallas Cowboys. And the problem with that is, when he has all the power, when he's the owner, when he's the general manager, clouds his judgment and all of the responsibilities, him not being, all the responsibilities he just can't satisfy. And now you hear some of the things that he's saying. You're wondering, is that old age getting to him? Some of the stuff that he says after the game, sometimes there would be real football intellect in terms of what came out of Jerry Jones's mouth. And most of the time, I would disagree with it, but there was at least some intellectual concepts here and there. Now I really don't know what he's saying anymore. And the Dallas Cowboys are just beyond a mess. As far as the Houston Texans, I have to say, I think I've been pretty underwhelmed with them this season, and I thought this game was the story of that. Now, it took that moment, that double fumble from Cooper Rush and the Cowboy lineman to break this game open, because the Texans offense was pedestrian. On the Texans defense, they've been elite this season. They've been playing like a top 8 unit, and they're really the reason why the Houston Texans are 7-4. Or else this would be a really underwhelming season if you're a Texans fan. If you were a Texans fan, I have to say, I think the sophomore slump with CJ Stroud has been real. He is not performing the level that he did in his rookie year. You know, this is 2 straight games now where he's thrown. In these 2 games, this game and the Detroit game, he has thrown 3 god-awful interceptions. I mean, all 3 have been awful. They've been awfully inaccurate. And and sometimes, you know, when you're an elite quarterback, sometimes you just make the wrong decision. Bad decision making, it happens once in a while. You know, you can't get everything right. You can't read everything right. And sometimes you just throw the ball in the wrong area. The problem with these interceptions is not reading the defense wrong. It's none of that. You're just missing the receiver. These receivers are running wide open. That first interception to Detroit, against Detroit, you know, Carlton Davis jumps it. Again, the one thing you can't do with an out route is leave it inside, or you give that corner the opportunity to make a play on the football. That second interception against Detroit, the dude is wide open as ever. Like, it is the most simple throw to make. If you throw the ball with a little bit of velocity, he decides to try to loft it up there. Not only is it short, but the ball is thrown so slow that it gives Carlton Davis an opportunity to basically fair catch it before he got the interception. And then this one, I mean, he misses. I believe it was, I don't know if it was Tank Dell or Nico Collins. I'm forgetting exactly who the receiver was that was wide open on the play, but he overthrows him by about, you know, he throws it 10 yards higher than what it's supposed to be, and it's right into the hands of the right into the hands of Malik Hooker. It was a horrible, god-awful throw. And the Texans just overall this season, they've been massively underwhelming. Yes, not having Nico Collins is a big impact in what we've seen of CJ Stroud of late. But to be honest, even when he had him throughout the duration of the season, it has been pretty poor from CJ Stroud. You know, it's just the truth. It's just the honest reality. This season, overall, he's really struggled in certain games. I look back to how he played, you know, how he played against Minnesota. I thought he played, you know, decent against Jacksonville. I thought again against the Green Bay Packers he was poor, 10 of 21, 86 yards. It's not the same CJ Stroud, and I don't think it's the same Houston Texans as last season. So, you know, when you look at teams like Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Kansas City, I don't put them in Houston in that class. What they benefit on is they have arguably the worst division in football, with the Colts, Titans, and Jaguars being their 3 competitors. So that's a big boast for them. But yeah, there's some serious issues if you're Houston Texans fans, at least in my opinion, with the relative expectations coming into the season, with CJ Stroud being in the second year. And I think it's been a pretty poor start to the season. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we will discuss the 76ers dropping to 2-11.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign. wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit, I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant, I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Before the break, we discussed the Texans' Monday night victory over the Dallas Cowboys. We move on to react to the 76ers dropping to 2-11 with the loss to Miami, and then their supposed team meeting after the game. And no, I say quote unquote, but they had a team meeting after the game. It's not something in speculation. It's something that did happen. But there was some interesting reports that came out of that meeting. And look, the 76ers, they've been awful this season. They've been, there's a team now that brought in Paul George before the season to partner up with Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. And the relative expectation for this team was them competing for at least in a spot in the NBA Finals. I never thought they were a legitimate team to reach the NBA Finals, because the 76ers process has always been hard to get behind, just with the simple fact that Embiid and his questionable health. And well, usually we have to wait till the end of the season for the 76ers to pay that price, but we've already seen it so far. They're 2-11. Embiid has missed a majority of the beginning of the season. Came back recently, and since he's wow, this cough is bad. But since he's been back, he has been really, really not at the level that we expect of him. He looks very, very stagnant. He looks like he doesn't trust his body. The movements is wrong. He had a little bit of an acceleration to him that doesn't exist. The athleticism is not there. He moves a little bit on edge, if that makes sense. He doesn't play with the free-flowing nature that he does in the past, and you're seeing it major. By the way, Joel Embiid is a player who regularly gets to the free throw line, and not only he gets to the free throw line, he makes his free throws. He is when he's at his best, he is impossible to stop. He's getting 10, 15 free throws a game. He didn't shoot a single free throw against the Miami Heat. Not a single one. That says a story of what he is right now. Not only that, he's averaging 14 points a game this season. 14.7 in the 3 games that he's played this season. That is 20 points less than the 34.7 points he averaged last season. The harsh reality is he's not fit. He's not 100%. And look, the 76ers, they are in a little bit of a desperate position. That's why, they put Embiid out there as soon as he can. But if Joel Embiid is continue to performing like this, you might as well. I mean, you're not going to win games with him performing like this, so you might as well let him get fully the time off, let him completely heal his injury, so he's not having to play like, he's not having to play with the injuries that he's playing with. You know what I mean? Because if he's gonna be continuing to perform like this, why don't they just shut him out? You know, you don't get no benefit of playing Joel Embiid if he's playing at this level. In fact, it can only be a detriment because it can only lead to, future re-injury of the injury. And if I'm a 76er, I'm seeing the way Embiid has been performing, and if I don't believe that he'll get better relatively soon, I'm shutting him down. You're 2-11, but I mean, are you gonna start? You're telling me with Embiid you playing the way he is playing in the last couple of games that he's gonna be the one that turns it around? No, he's just not. He's not at that level yet. So you might as well see him out. The thing about the 76ers that gives you that will give 76ers fans hope is the East is pretty crap. Only 4 teams have a winning record in the East after this long into the season. That's unbelievable. You compare that to the Western Conference, which has 11 teams with a winning record, compared to 4 of the Eastern Conference. So there's some life there if you are a 76ers fan, because it takes one run to get back into the mix of things. And you still have Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Embiid, when they, all fully healthy playing together. But it just seems like the same old story with 76ers. And then, it was another second half collapse. They have had multiple now in the last couple of games. This time it came against the Miami Heat, in which they got outscored. In the second half, 53 to 33, and Philadelphia, they had a good lead in this one throughout the first couple of quarters, but Miami did a good job to limit the bleeding in that second quarter to bring them back within the game. And then they were able to take over and go on that run that they went on in the third quarter. And it just seemed like it was the same story that happened to the 76ers earlier this week was going to happen again. And then now the interesting thing that came out of this game was the supposed team meeting after the 76ers, or not supposed, but the team meeting that happened after the Sixers game where, there was some open-hearted conversations. And what I love about this team meeting was that sometimes players, whenever situations like this happen, it tends to be players only. But the fact that the coaches were involved, that everybody was involved, I believe it did better for the continuity of this organization, for the brotherhood amongst this team, the belief in the coaches, and there was no tongues held. We know the big report that Tyrese Maxey was able to challenge Joel Embiid over being tardy. Good for Tyrese Maxey, Just because Joel Embiid is the best player on the 76ers team doesn't mean he should be held to special responsibility, be given special circumstances if not following directions. And if Embiid is continuously being tardy, that's just a precedent as the leader of the organization, and that is not a part of the right culture. I don't like making cross-sport comparisons, but compare that to Tom Brady for the Patriots. Could you imagine Julian Edelman challenging, I guess that's a bad example, but yeah, let's just use it. Could you imagine Julian Edelman challenging Tom Brady in terms of not putting in enough time on the football field, not putting in enough practice? I mean, that'd be ridiculous, no? And I'm not saying this is not ridiculous. Obviously, Tyrese Maxey is well in his right to do what he did, but it just proved that, maybe Joel Embiid is... look, I don't want to use a disrespectful word, but maybe he's getting treated too much like a prince in the 76ers, even though he hasn't won anything for them. We know the comments he had in terms of playing back-to-backs, and now this. It's unbelievable to me the way some 76ers fans will defend him because, well, he has provided nothing of value to this 76ers organization. Allen Iverson, he was able to reach the finals. Joel Embiid hasn't reached the semifinals. He hasn't even really sniffed the semifinal, if you have to be honest, as well. And, actually, no, he did sniff the... When I say semifinal, I mean the Eastern Conference Finals. And actually, he did sniff the Eastern Conference Finals. They lost on a buzzer beater, doink, 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 against the Kawhi-led Raptors. Which, by the way, is still to this day the most, impressive Sixers team and the team that went on the longest run in the whole Joel Embiid era on the 76ers. But, but yeah, absolutely. I'm very interested to see how this team will turn it around. I don't know. It's a difficult one. But a short break here coming up. When we come back, we will discuss the Jets firing Joe Douglas.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast. Before the break, we discussed the 76ers dropping to 2-11 in their supposed team meeting after the game. We have to move on to discuss the Jets firing GM Joe Douglas. Now, the Jets' experience has been absolutely devastating this season. They fired Robert Saleh earlier this year after that loss to Minnesota, which dropped them to 2-3. And they were looking for immediate answers. And since that firing, they have improved so much that they are 3-8 now. So they went since then 1-6, 1-5, 1-5. Their one lone win coming against a Texans team that I spoke a little bit about in the first segment. They're not that great of a football team. But yeah, the Jets are the Jets, and despite signing Aaron Rodgers, the Jets controller, the Jets culture is undefeated, and they've been a losing team for the entirety of my football watching life. I have to say I wasn't really around. I was around, but I wasn't really cognitive enough to understand what was going on during the Rex Ryan era. So I've never seen the Jets be a good football team. They had that 1 year with Fitzpatrick where I believe they finished 10-6, but they missed the playoffs. Well, when they lost to Buffalo in Week 17, yeah, it's been horrible, and you finally end up getting Aaron Rodgers back, and as you get Aaron Rodgers back, suddenly your defense drops from being, a top 3 defense into the league to, pretty pedestrian. I'd probably rank them in like the 10 to 15 range, if not even lower. They're nowhere near the greatness of some of the Jets defenses teams we've seen in the past couple of years. The main issue with those two teams is, those couple of teams is that, Zach Wilson was their starter for the first season and for both seasons, essentially. Aaron Rodgers got hurt the first couple of plays in the first game. But you had Zach Wilson at quarterback, and how elite you play defensively, you're not getting that many results. Now, Aaron Rodgers, I really don't think he's been terrible this season. Now, obviously, there's been some throws that he's left out there that he's made in the past, and he's become a little bit more turnover frequent in the past, but I don't see much decrease in arm velocity, arm accuracy, even pocket presence, and his mobility. I don't see it that much worse. I just see a dude that's uncomfortable in the environment he's in and don't have much cohesion with the wide receivers, period. Another devastating part about this, if you're a Jets fan, is that you've also brought in Devontae Adams, and they're looking the way that they've looked so far this season. Yeah, I don't know. I really, as a Jets fan, I really do not know where to go. Obviously, this season now is a bust, and you try to rack up whatever you can and out of the season and move on. But you're going forward. You have Rodgers for another year at least. You have a team that's missing now general manager who. Joe Douglas, by the way, that was the main topic of the segment, is that the fact Joe Douglas was fired. But you fire Joe Douglas, you fire Robert Saleh, but when it's time to fire Woody Johnson, who's been coaching these GMs and head coaches over and over again, and he's continuously has got it wrong. When it's time to, when is the time for the New York Jets fans to rise up, to go and protest the streets, demanding Woody Johnson sells the team, as European fans would do in Europe. European soccer fans will do in Europe. You see with the Glazers ownership group at United, who also, by the way, own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and certain other groups that run their clubs really poorly. The fans have, they're not afraid to say something about it. Where is that in the American culture? And I think Joe Douglas overall has done a good job building that defense. I think offensively, this a lot of people said before the season, this is Aaron Rodgers' most talented team that he's had in his career. Well, guess what? I mean, this is a really talented football team, and Joe Douglas has a lot to do with that. Now I think there's been questionable decision makings he's had in his tenure, but when it comes to this team, is this seriously the general manager that you are supposed to blame for this, or is it just the fact that this team just has a losing mentality, losing culture, and are pretty unlucky too? There's an unlucky element to it as well. And I don't know what I don't know where the Jets go from here. You're obviously tied with Aaron Rodgers now for a pretty long time, and or not a long time, but for another year. But again, he's a 40-year-old quarterback, and you're reeling right now. Is it full-on rebuild mode when you're firing your head coach, when you're firing your general manager? It's almost setting up a rebuild. It's almost admitting the failures of this Aaron Rodgers trade. They've compounded that failure by also adding in another failure trade of getting Devontae Adams, which doesn't cost nearly as much, but it's still assets lost to make that acquisition happen. And by the way, I feel for Devontae Adams. He's left Green Bay, to try to play with his best friend Derek Carr. Derek Carr ended up getting traded away. He tries to go back to Aaron Rodgers to try to kind of recapture that old glory that he had with the Packers. And guess what? They're even worse or they're just as bad as the Raiders. And I firmly believe players like Devontae Adams, players like Keenan Allen, I think they deserve a lot more from the production that they've had and the consistent levels that they've had in their careers. They deserve a lot more in terms. Actually, Devontae Adams has played in quite amount of big games, but he hasn't played in the game. And Keenan Allen, he's played in very few big games, and I think he's one of the most underrated receivers in the history of football. And yeah, it's just unfortunate for Devontae Adams. It's unfortunate for Robert Saleh as well. I think he's been part of this unlucky group of occurrences to happen with the Jets, and yeah, it's a mess. And they can fire Joe Douglas all they want. The real issue with this New York Giants team won't go until this owner decides to either sell the football team or take his head out of where the sun doesn't shine and bring in proper football aficionados to manage completely the sporting side of the game, and he can just sit there and collect the paycheck like what most owners are good for, because these owners, they're not football men. I know, you look at Jerry Jones and he did play the occasional college football, but these owners, they got rich off of their businesses or oil or something of that sort. They, in terms of being able to make football decisions, not the most brightest. And I think Woody Allen's a perfect example of that. Short break here coming up. When we come back, we will discuss the Pep Guardiola agreeing a new contract to stay at Manchester City.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Before the break, we discussed the Jets firing General Manager Joe Douglas. We move on to react to Pep Guardiola. He has agreed to a new contract to stay at Manchester City and end speculation that he will be leaving Manchester City at the end of the season. That speculation is over. He has extended his contract for 1 more year, so we'll wait till next season to have these is Guardiola gonna stay, is he not conversations all over again. But yeah, he's extended his contract to 1 more year after this season. And yeah, it's there was some uncertainty around Manchester City with these next couple of months with the trial and all the charges and everything of that sort. But what has not been uncertain is Pep Guardiola's constant belief that, or at least the way he's made it seem that his belief that City has done nothing wrong, that these are all just allegations and all of them are inaccurate, and he's been very very forthcoming on the whole notion that if City are actually guilty of any of these, that that he will immediately leave the club. There's no way about it, and he does not stand for that and all that. And well, look, he's had a sustained dominance at Manchester City like no other, and it was, by the way, it was only his choice to make. I just want to say the obvious. Obviously there was no planet that City, there was no universe, there was no galaxy, there was no nothing that City, wanted to go into a different direction or had to think about it or anything like that. It was, it was his decision on whether or not that he wanted to stay at Manchester City or not. Maybe he wanted a rest from football. We know Jurgen Klopp has went that route. Maybe he wanted to see his side, take his sides more into the international management field with the World Cup coming up in America. We saw what Mauricio Pochettino did in, deciding to go from club football to managing international football and take on the U.S. men's national team. Maybe he wanted to do something like that where he could also get that little bit of rest and not having to deal with the day-to-day of being a manager, rather than do work international window by international window. But Guardiola, he wants to stay in Manchester City, and he has some work to do this season. With Manchester City does, they find themselves in a difficult position in the Premier League. I have to say, not a position that they haven't been in. I think City, they've done this before against the same opposition in Liverpool. Right now they're down 5 points through 11 games. They've made up wider gaps than that. But it is tricky with how they've looked of late. They have 4 straight defeats. And maybe that also adds to the feel of Manchester City. When you're constantly winning, at least for me, as a fan, when you're constantly winning championships and you're always the best team, game in, game out, it comes a little bit hard to get motivated to continue to give everything your all, give 100%, put in the work for that next trophy, because you've won 7 million of them already, and the way that Guardiola keeps this Manchester City team hungry and focused and motivated year in and year out, despite how they win the Premier League the last 3 years, they battle for the 4th Premier League title like it's their first one. How they say live every day like your last. Under Pep Guardiola, the City team performs every season like it's their first, and there's no complacency with them. Even with these 4 losses, I don't think the problem was complacency. I think they just got done away by Sporting Lisbon in a tough atmosphere. They lost to Bournemouth in a interesting game. Bournemouth just had that little bit of quality to take advantage of the chances they come. And that Brighton game was, a little bit of a smash and grab way to get that victory. And for Brighton, after City, they had a control and the lead of most of the game. But City, they're an amazing team. They have great talent. I would like to see what Pep Guardiola decides to do in terms of countering the Ballon d'Or winner winning the ACL. How they balance that. A lot of people have blamed that for their 4 losses and how it's that loss has made it a little bit easier for Manchester City opponents to play through that in midfield. They lack that physical grit and that defensive nature of Rodri being in there. You can put in Kovacic in there to sit next to Gundogan, but when you're physically, whenever you're physically just getting, dominated in that area, it makes it difficult, and I think that loss that they've had with Rodri, it's been it's a big loss, because I don't think Kovacic on his own can make up for, the defensive capabilities of Rodri in midfield, but also the way he can dictate the tempo and pace of the game. I don't think Kovacic could do it at that level, but I think City are going to be able to adapt, and they've always been able to adapt to key injuries and all that under Guardiola. I just think this one is a little bit more tricky, but it's still something that definitely I have full faith and confidence in Pep Guardiola to be able to, sort out, the loss of Rodri and this 4-game fixture list. And also Guardiola, he does a great job of doing mind games, saying, after that game, he said, maybe it's time for another team to win the Premier League. We can't win it every year. Mind games at its finest. And I don't think there's many sports, especially leagues out there, that where managers do more mind games than in the Premier League. Especially back then with Sir Alex Ferguson, Rafa Benitez, and the crew. They love these little sound bites in the pressers to leave some sort of thought in the reporters' minds. Not reporters' minds, but the opposing, whether it's the opposing team, sometimes it's the opposing managers. They try to get a leg up through these press conferences, and for me, that's crazy. And sometimes it works too. Sometimes certain managers, like Sir Alex Ferguson, you remember the Sir Alex Ferguson versus Rafa Benitez sort of back and forth that they had at the in the press conferences. It was Rafa Benitez almost taking the bait of something Sir Alex Ferguson said that led him to come and do a whole presentation on why Sir Alex Ferguson was wrong. I forgot exactly what they were arguing about, but he lost the composure there, and I think when it comes to the football on the pitch, that eventually matters. Composure is a very important thing, and short break here coming up. When we come back, we will discuss the 49ers. Another loss to the Seattle Seahawks. Before the break, we discussed Pep Guardiola agreeing a new contract to stay in Manchester City. We move on to discuss the 49ers and whether or not they're suffering from a Super Bowl hangover. And I think it's a little bit more complex than just the term Super Bowl hangover. I think that is a little bit of a not lazy narrative, but a little just lazy term to throw out there for a team that doesn't perform as well as they do the previous season. after losing the Super Bowl. But well, look, the 49ers, they have been poor this season. I mean, 5-5 by their standards is god awful through 5 games. They've had 3 games now where they've lost 3 of the 5 games that they lost, and they were all against division opponents as well, which compounds it. They've had 90% probability at some point in the second half, and they've managed to lose all 3 of those games. It really is incredible work what this 49ers team has been able to do. I mean, and now they're 5-5, and their next 2 games is Green Bay and Buffalo. It's really make or break for the season, and it reminds me almost similar position that Buffalo Bills had themselves last season. I believe through 12 games they were 6-6. You're 49ers. If you're as a 49ers fan, these next 2 games is so crucial. They are 5-5, but they have a 1-3 division record, and they're tied. The Niners are tied with the Rams and Seahawks, but they're a game behind the Cardinals. And if you compare the Cardinals fixtures to the Niners, the Cardinals have the Seahawks twice, the Vikings, they have the Patriots, Panthers, and then the Rams before that, a Week 18 matchup against the 49ers. While the 49ers in that stretch have the Packers, Bills, Bears, Rams, Miami, Detroit. Obviously, different set of fixtures there. Completely different set of fixtures there. The 49ers have a much difficult record. And by the way, on top of that, the 49ers have the Arizona has a tiebreaker over the 49ers. They have a way better division record, and they have a game advantage. So the 49ers are on the outside looking in, to say the least. And yeah, it's going to be difficult for them. Now, the 49ers, they've started out 5-5, and they've went on deep runs, but it's about this time that they finally start clicking. This Niners team is still not clicking, and we're more than halfway through the season. Now, maybe the fact that you have some quality opponents in the Packers and Bills coming up will finally force this team to get it right, because now they're literally playing with the season on the line in each game. But who remains to be seen. The Seahawks game, I would sit here and analyze the game, but it's pretty much the same story with the 49ers so far this season. Except, honestly, this game is probably one of their pro performances of the season because of that offense. That offense can generate nothing. 17 points. They really struggled to move the ball. Brock Purdy had 159 passing yards. As a unit, the 49ers only ran the ball for a little bit less than 130 yards, I believe. Or a little bit more than 130 yards. They only had about 290 yards of offense. 294, 95 yards of offense. And 2 touchdowns the whole game. Well, you're going to struggle to win many football games in the National Football League when you generate such little offense and have such little consistency in terms of extending drives. The 49ers had a 10-play drive where they only managed 12 yards or something like that. Or was it 22 yards or something? And they took out 6 minutes of the clock. I mean, that's such a 49ers thing to do. By the way, the 49ers as well, they're very, very, the Kyle Shanahan, he loves making the game as short as possible in terms of when he snaps the ball and the style of play that this Niners team has. Well, sometimes they're wasting clock so much that at the end of the game, they find themselves in a position where they're needing some of that clock back. And it's happened over and over again this season. And it's just the same story with these 49ers. I think, I can't even say much about the red zone offense in this game because we weren't even in the red zone much. defensively, they played really, really well throughout the first couple of quarters. Then, well, when it was time to make that a stop, they couldn't contain Geno Smith. Geno Smith comes up with 2 runs that absolutely gashes the Niners and destroys the game for them. And then one of the runs ended up leading into a touchdown for the Seattle Seahawks that wins the game with 12 seconds left. And yeah, I mean, we know Mitch Mishnowski was out, but by the way, at the start of that possession, the Niners are punting from pretty good field position. They have Pat O'Donnell, by the way, is the punter that came in. They have no returner back, and somehow Pat O'Donnell is not able to pin them, is not able to give that ball out of the end zone. That is an absolute disaster, because then they get the ball at the 20, and a few moments later, Geno Smith is running into the end zone. And also, the disheartening thing about it is that the 49ers got the big sack that they needed. I believe it was Yetur Gross-Matos was making his first appearance for the Niners. And he did... I don't know if it was him or Leonard Floyd, it don't matter. But someone got the sack. And the Seahawks find themselves in a position where they were in, I think, 2nd and long or 3rd and long. Something of that sort. And, there's no quarterback spy. The defensive line gets out of their lanes, allows a rushing lane to open for Geno Smith. And Geno Smith is out of there to not only make up the yards that they lost on that sack, but to also get a first down. And then he ended up getting that second rushing touchdown, second rush, where a little bit later in that drive, and it led to a touchdown. Again, everybody's in man-to-man coverage. The pass rush doesn't stay in their lanes. Nobody is spying Geno Smith. And he notices he has a free reign to the end zone, and he takes it, and the Seattle Seahawks win, and they win their first game against the 49ers since High School Musical came out for your Disney fans. It's been such a long time since the Seahawks. The Seahawks haven't beat the Niners in the Brock Purdy era. You have to go back to Russell Wilson, I believe, the last time they beat the 49ers. And, it's just devastating. It's just a devastating loss. The fact that it's a division loss makes it worse. The fact that it's against the Seahawks, literally the worst of worst in terms of rivals. But look, the 49ers, even with the record, even with the schedule they have remaining, the one silver lining is you're only a game behind Arizona, who's first in your division. So you still control everything. And with one crazy run, you suddenly can look like the best team in the NFC again. But there's nothing that been with this 49ers team that gives me that sort of belief that they'll go on one of those runs. Except the notion that they've set a precedent for it. They've done that multiple times now for the last 3 years or so. But eventually I think there's a price to be paid from the amount of opportunities the 49ers have squandered to win that Super Bowl. Eventually you're gonna have to pay that price, and I wouldn't say it's coming now, but then more and more it seems like it's happening right now. But thank you guys, though, for tuning into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram for more content updates. So thank you once again. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.